From days of old, men with money and power have always sought after women, and they were relatively easy to get. But there comes a certain type of woman that wasn't as easy to get for most men living in France. These were the French courtesans. Although a lot is thought to be known about these women, the way they lived their lives has always remained a mystery, until now. Welcome to Crazy Histories, where we bring you the craziest, weirdest facts from human history. Join us today as we look at crazy life of a French courtesan. They were treated as slaves. It's no secret that the French court was supportive of slavery. Men and women captured during military conquests were shipped all over the state and auctioned off to the highest bidder, at which point they became the property of some aristocrat or other. And those aristocrats usually had one thing on their minds when buying a young slave: coitus. The luckier ones would then be taken to serve as mistress slaves in the court of the king. See, slaves were absolutely devoid of rights in French law. They were part of the furniture, no better than the objects surrounding them. And just as it's technically impossible to have an affair with your bookcase, French law didn't consider coitus with a courtesan slave to be infidelity. When adultery began to be frowned upon in the French court, the French did what any perv would do and started molesting their slaves at an unprecedented rate. Looks, gender, and even age were no barrier, as once you were established as a courtesan of the French court, it was all fair game for the aristocrats to use you as they like. They'd offered other services. Sometimes, French courtesans offered to do other services to get paid, like washing clothes, or the dishes, or the house, babysitting the children, taking care of the pets, taking care of the gardens. The smarter courtesans were even tasked with fixing appliances. This would have been fine, however. The courtesans began to display sexual activities in the house, causing the children to take up this behavior also. This also caused trouble in their marriages, because the courtesans began to have affairs with the husbands also, causing marriages to be broken cause of infidelity. They also affected the wives, because the wives started to copy the courtesans, and sooner or later the wives became courtesans themselves. And this was how some famous courtesans climbed to the top of the social ladder. Destroying the kids' minds, destroying the marriage for the husbands and the wives. Sooner or later, courtesans became the wives of kings and the advisors of queens. The courtesans caused wars and riots. When they become wives of kings, they began to influence and manipulate their decisions, the decisions of the kings. They would make the kings put laws in place that the larger population did not agree with, causing riots to ensue. In worst-case scenarios, these courtesan kings would anger the king of another foreign land, and it would make them declare war. This would then lead to the destruction of both kingdoms. This carried on for generations and generations, until Christianity began to take hold of France. This caused the courtesans to emigrate to other lands, and some of them even converted to Christianity, therefore reducing the total population of courtesans in France. Public displays of affection. If you think top-shelf lads, mags, and saucy billboards are rude, just be thankful you're not living in or around the French court, the 1700s or 1800s, and you'd find yourself completely surrounded by street displays of coitus. Literally, every available corner in the state served as a potential arena for a man and his courtesan. Although courtesans were seen as the creme de la creme of mistresses, and it sounds weird that they would carry out public displays of coitus, nothing was impossible for an aristocrat, as long as he had enough money and power. It became so common that street artists began to paint the walls of buildings in France, depicting art pieces of aristocrats and courtesans doing the rump. X-rated gray stones. As you may have gathered, no aspect of life in France was far removed from thoughts of coitus, and that included death. Unlike our sparse epitaphs, French men and women would include whole biographies on the tombstones of courtesans, detailing every little moment of their lives. And since their lives were often pretty bawdy, that made for some X-rated tombstones. For example, one is known to have read, "Put on your party hats and don't say no to coitus with pretty girls, as you won't get a chance when you're dead." Wow, interesting advice, huh? Others, marking the spot where husbands have buried their wives, describe the first night of copulation. with one memorable one boasting about how the courtesan was first seduced aged 7. One in particular is famous for describing in great detail a three-way relationship between two men and a courtesan, including complimentary passages on the woman's nipples and how punctual she was at dealing with body hair. What a trait to be remembered for! Their preferred methods of contraception. Before the invention of effective contraceptive methods, such as the condom or the pill, it might be wild to imagine, but people had their own different methods of contraception, and the French courtesans were no different. They frequently saw men, and so they had to come up with their own effective methods to curb pregnancy. An example of these weird contraceptive methods was the use of blacksmith water and lead. This concoction was a preferred go-to method for many courtesans. Some even befriended blacksmiths, just so they could have easy access to such materials such as tar and coal. The irony is lead consumption does prevent pregnancy, but not in the way you would think. Lead consumption leads to infertility as a whole, causing the courtesan to be unable to give birth permanently. And lead is also extremely toxic, which leads to a lot of their deaths. Mass infanticide. Here we get to one of the bleaker sides of French courtesan culture. Some of you may have been wondering how the French aristocrats and their courtesans managed so much coitus in the days before the pill. Well, according to historian Mary Beard, they simply redefined the term abortion to a terrifying degree. And I mean terrifying. Since we now know virtually all French contraception methods were useless, all the unwanted pregnancies must have gone somewhere. And that somewhere was apparently the rubbish dump. No joke, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that French courtesans who got unwanted babies from kings and aristocrats just casually tossed newborn babies away. From old letters advocating the practice to clues that discarded babies may have been a major source of slaves, the signs all indicate a culture totally at home with mass infanticide. Chew on that next time someone describes our civilization as violent. They started training at a very young age. The mistresses of the French court were particularly different from other courtesans around Europe because they were already sexually trained from a very young age. Most of the courtesans already began hanging out with the top mistress from the age of 8, following all their steps daily and learning from her, the do's and don'ts, and everything in between. This was standard practice to ensure that when the little girl eventually starts working, she would be far better than any other courtesan around because she already skipped the learning phase by the time she actually started working. Eventually, this proves to be a smart tactic because when the elder mistress is inevitably dismissed from the court for being the old, her young protege would still give her money to take care of herself. And needless to say, at a certain point during the career of the younger mistress, she too will find her own protege to tutor so as to benefit from when she becomes old. Kind of like a weird retirement plan. With all that has been said, what do you think about the lives of the French courtesans now? Which fact was the most shocking to you? Which other historical eras would you like us to talk about? Tell me your answers down in the comments section. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also hit the bell as well so you don't miss any video cause we have a lot more interesting things to come. See you soon.